The first light of dawn rolled over Mondo like a gentle blessing, washing the earth in gold. The town stirred slowly, then all at once, drums thumped from a distance, calling people into a new day. Smoke rose from early cooking fires, and traders dusted off their stalls as the sun climbed higher. Women arranged baskets of cassava and bright peppers, while men tied ropes, hammered wood, and shouted greetings across the red earth paths. Even before the roosters finished crowing, the gossip had begun. Old Mama Beezy leaned across her stall and whispered, Today will not pass quietly. I feel it in my bones." Her friend nodded, eyes sharp, always hungry for stories carried by morning winds. Mondo had always taken pride in its traditions. Its people held tight to the teachings of their ancestors: honor before wealth, responsibility before pride, and respect before every action. Children grew up hearing these truths under the moonlight, sitting around fires as elders spoke. People greeted neighbors like family, and the community moved like one heartbeat. Here, a person's name meant everything. Here, promises were sacred. And when someone broke these values, the whole town remembered for years. At the center of all this stood the market, the loud, living heart of Mondo. It was where laughter mingled with arguments, where traders bargained as if wrestling with spirits, and where every secret eventually crawled out into the open. "Come and buy fresh yam," one man shouted. "Don't touch if you won't pay," a woman snapped at a careless boy. Children ran between stalls, goats bleated, and the smell of roasted maize drifted through the air. The market watched, judged, forgave, and punished all at once, for it was the place where a person's true nature always revealed itself. But beneath the busy noises lay something new, soft whispers of greed rising among the younger generation. "Times have changed," some youth said, caring more for flashy clothes and quick gains than the old teachings. Elders sighed, shaking their heads. A tree that forgets its roots cannot stand for long. Still, the gap between old and new widened each day, stirring unease like a drumbeat no one could silence. Then, as the sun brightened, a hush swept across the market, not a quiet of peace, but a sharp pause of attention. Aisha entered with a sway in her walk and sparkles stitched into her bold, bright wrapper. Her bracelets clinked like she carried her own rhythm, and her perfume drifted behind her like a challenge. Women frowned immediately. Men leaned forward, whispering behind hands. Even children stared, for Aisha never blended into the crowd. She cut through it like a blade of silver. She smiled as eyes followed her, enjoying every second. A trader muttered under his breath, "Beauty is good, but trouble wrapped itself in that girl." Aisha tossed her long braids back and said loudly to no one in particular, "Some of you stare as if you've never seen grace before." Her voice dripped with pride, and a few women sucked their teeth in annoyance. Her beauty was undeniable, eyes sharp as moonlit water, skin glowing like polished bronze. But behind that beauty lay something darker, something many in Mondo knew too well. Aisha spoke sweetly when she wanted something, but her kindness ended the moment she got it. She treated promises like dust and advice like noise. Everyone could see the arrogance dancing in her smile. As she walked past the stalls, people shifted away, not out of respect but out of exhaustion. Mama Beezy murmured. "Here comes the queen of empty promises." Another woman added, "Last week she borrowed from 3 stalls and paid none. Today she will ask again. Watch her mouth." Aisha pretended not to hear, but her chin lifted slightly, refusing to show shame. Her habit was well known across Mondo. She would stroll into the market with charm dripping from her lips, ask for money or goods, promise repayment, soon, very soon, then vanish for days, weeks, sometimes months. When cornered, she laughed it off. "Why are you all so serious?" she would say. "Life is long. I will pay when the spirits bless me." But Mondo had grown tired. As Aisha passed one stall, a woman folded her arms tightly. "Don't even try it today, Aisha. My heart has no patience left." A man nearby shook his head and muttered, "She thinks we are fools. Even goats keep their promises better." Aisha's smile flickered, just for a moment, but her pride held it in place. Still, the tension in the air was unmistakable. People were watching her not as a beauty but as a warning. Their frustration built like storm clouds gathering over the plains. And Mondo had learned one thing over generations. A person who plays with the respect of a community eventually faces a day of reckoning. That day was drawing closer for Aisha, even if she didn't know it yet. The sun sat warm and low over Mondo when Mama Tattoo stepped out of her compound. She walked slowly, leaning on her carved walking stick, the one her late husband made before joining the ancestors. Everyone who saw her greeted her with deep respect. Mama Tattoo was not just an elder, she was a pillar. She fed the hungry, settled disputes, and guided young people with a calm voice that carried the weight of truth. When someone in Mondo lost their way, they went to Mama Tattoo. And when Mama Tattoo spoke, even the wind listened. That was the woman Aisha approached one bright afternoon, wearing a humble smile that didn't reach her eyes. She greeted softly, "Mama Tattoo, may I speak with you?" The old woman nodded, heart open as always. Aisha started her story, how times were hard, how she needed help, how she would repay every coin, quickly, "I promise, Mama." Her voice trembled in all the right places, but underneath, she carried the sly confidence of someone who had practiced this act many times before. Mama Tattoo watched her closely. She saw the false sweetness, but she also believed in giving people a chance to prove who they could become. With a sigh that carried both hope and warning, she opened her small wooden box and handed Aisha the money. "My child," she said gently, "borrowed money is like a shadow, it follows you until you return it. Do not let this shadow grow long." Aisha nodded, pretending to be moved, even touching her chest as if the words touched her heart. But the moment she stepped outside the compound, her expression changed. She burst into laughter and whispered to herself, "Old woman, your warnings are too soft. I have better things to do than pay back coins." She walked away proudly, fanning herself with the money as though it were the breeze she deserved. Days passed, then weeks, and Aisha began weaving lies like a spider. When Mama Tattoo came looking for her, Aisha disappeared behind stalls or pretended to be on an urgent errand. "Ah, Mama, I will come tomorrow," she said once, backing away before the elder could reply. Another day she claimed she was sick. Another day she claimed she had traveled. Every excuse came with a smile that never reached her eyes. Women in the market grew angrier each time they watched the scene. "She has no shame left," one hissed. Another replied, "If she cheats Mama Tattoo, who is safe from her tricks?" They warned her loudly, even in her presence, saying, "Aisha, you are playing with fire. Our community does not forget disrespect." Across the market, under the great meeting tree, the old men gathered as they always did. They chewed kola nuts and discussed everything from weather to wisdom. When Aisha's behavior came up, the elders shook their heads. One of them tapped his walking stick on the red earth and said, "Even the proud goat meets the hunter." The others murmured in agreement. Bad choices never stayed hidden in Mondo for long. And whispers spread about a traveler heading toward the town. A strong, disciplined figure known for fairness but also firmness. Some said he came for business. Others said destiny was guiding him. But one thing was certain, he would not bow to tricks, beauty, or sweet lies. For people like Aisha, he was the mirror they never wanted to face. Meanwhile, Aisha was living like a queen. She used the borrowed money to buy bright clothes that shimmered under the sun. She went to every party, dancing until her head spun. She took pictures everywhere, posing beside motorbikes she didn't own, showing off jewelry she hadn't earned, and posting everything online with captions like, "Blessed life." Her friends cheered her on, calling her the star of Mondo, and Aisha soaked in the attention like warm rain. Her pride grew heavier than her footsteps. She began walking through Mondo as though she owned every path. When elders greeted her, she barely nodded. When someone reminded her about the loan, she snapped, "Do not disturb me with small things." The power she felt was intoxicating, and in her mind, she was untouchable. But Mondo itself began to shift. People whispered behind her back. The elders frowned when she passed. Children pointed, asking, "Why does she act like that?" The gap between tradition and Aisha's vanity widened each day, like a crack spreading across the earth. And in Mondo, cracks always lead to something breaking. Aisha just didn't know yet that hers was coming soon. The market of Mondo grew louder each passing day as the women finally lost patience. They gathered near the row of yam stalls, arms crossed, voices sharp like cracked firewood. "This girl has no respect," one woman cried, shaking her head. "She takes from our elder and walks around shining like a peacock." Another added, "If Aisha continues like this, no one will trust anyone again. How can a community grow when lies walk freely in daylight?" Their anger was not just for Mama Tattoo, it was for the growing wound Aisha had opened in Wando. So the women marched to the elders' meeting tree, stopping only when the old men looked up. "Fathers," they called, "we need your wisdom. Aisha is shaming all of us." The whispers spread so fast that even Mama Tattoo could not hide from them. Each morning she sat at her shop, her hands trembling slightly as she arranged cassava and groundnuts. Customers came, but their eyes carried pity. Some offered soft words like, "Mama, you are too kind," while others mumbled, "You trusted the wrong girl." A few avoided her shop completely, afraid of being tied to the embarrassment. The once busy stall felt emptier, and Mama Tattoo's heart carried a quiet ache. She tried to smile, but the shame pressed on her shoulders like a heavy pot of water. She said nothing, yet everyone could see the wound. Meanwhile, Aisha walked past all the tension like a queen stepping over stones. When she overheard gossip, she tossed her hair and sneered, "They are only jealous. Let them talk." She told her friends, "People cannot stand to see a woman shine. They want me to be small like them." Her laughter rang across the market, but instead of charm, it carried poison. Every dismissive comment she made turned the resentment deeper. Wando was watching, and the town's silence grew dangerous. One evening, as the sun dipped low, footsteps echoed down the dusty road leading into Wando. Kato, Mama Tattoo's eldest son, returned after years in the city. He carried no loudness, no pride, only a calm strength that followed him like a shadow. His eyes observed everything, from the quiet markets to the tense faces. Villagers greeted him warmly, bowing slightly. "Welcome home, Kato," they said. He nodded, his presence steady as a tall Iroko tree. Despite his modern clothes and city ways, Kato walked with the rhythm of his ancestors. He spoke politely, listened deeply, and greeted elders with respect. People admired him not because of where he came from, but because of how he carried himself. Tradition rested easily on his shoulders. Even the market women whispered, "Ah, Mama Tattoo's son has returned. A true man of Mwando." But when Kato reached his mother's shop and saw her tired smile, his heart tightened. He recognized the pain she tried to hide. That night, sitting by her small cooking fire, he listened as she explained everything: Aisha's lies, the mockery, the growing shame. Kato's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. "Mama," he said softly, "your dignity is mine to protect." Inside him, a vow formed like steel. He would not allow disrespect to stain his family. The next day, stories about Aisha began to reach him from every corner. He listened as traders shook their heads and shared how she borrowed onions, spices, even small coins, always with promises she never kept. Some spoke with anger, others with fear. Kato asked quiet questions, gathering every detail like pieces of a puzzle. A pattern soon revealed itself: charm, lies, escape, repeat. The more he learned, the more he understood this was not a single mistake, it was a chain of broken trust stretching across Mwando. Many had stayed silent to avoid conflict, swallowing their pain. Kato felt a deep responsibility. "This is more than money," he murmured. "This is a crack in the unity of the town." From that day forward, Kato began to watch Aisha the way a patient hunter studies a cunning fox. He did not confront her or spread rumors. Instead, he observed her routes through the market, the way she laughed at warnings, the small circle of people she manipulated. Aisha, wrapped in her pride, never noticed his steady gaze. But Mwando did, and some villagers whispered, "The hunter has arrived. The fox will soon learn she is not the smartest in the forest." Kato waited, calm and sure, knowing the right moment would soon reveal itself. Aisha's shine began to dim long before she noticed it. The friends who once followed her like shadows slowly drifted away. At first, they claimed they were busy, but the truth was simple. Without money for drinks, parties, and fancy outings, Aisha was no longer useful to them. One afternoon she called out, "Sarah, wait for me." But the girl walked faster, pretending not to hear. Another friend shrugged when Aisha tried to sit with them. "We're, full today," she said awkwardly. For the first time, Aisha sat alone in the market square, staring at the dust beneath her feet. Yet pride covered her eyes like thick smoke, blocking the lesson. Her loneliness pushed her to try borrowing again, but things had changed. Rumors about her unpaid debts had traveled faster than wildfire in the dry season. Whenever she approached someone new, they stepped back as if avoiding a snake. "Please, I only need a small amount," she said with a forced smile. The butcher shook his head. "I've heard your story, Aisha. I am not ready to be the next fool." Even strangers whispered, "Beware of her, she does not return what she takes." Everywhere she turned, doors closed. Cornered, Aisha felt her world shrinking. But instead of stopping to reflect, her anger rose. "They are all against me," she muttered. "These people are jealous. They want to see me suffer." She refused to accept she had caused her own downfall. Her chest burned with frustration, but she walked with her chin high, clinging to the last drops of pride. While she stumbled deeper into her problems, Cato moved with purpose. Rather than confronting her in secret or reacting emotionally, he followed the old ways of Mondo. "A matter that affects the community," he said softly, "must be judged by the community." His voice carried the calm wisdom of his ancestors. Tradition demanded fairness, witnesses, and truth spoken under the watch of the elders. So a message spread. A meeting would be held under the great baobab tree, the sacred place where disputes had been settled for generations. The tree stood tall and ancient, its thick branches shaped like open arms, ready to hold the truth. People whispered, "If a case reaches the baobab, it is serious." Merchants closed their stalls early. Even children felt the weight in the air. Early the next morning, the elders sent a messenger to Aisha's home. He called out in a firm voice, "Aisha, the Council of Elders summons you under the baobab." The words hit her like hot coals. Such a summons was rare and reserved only for grave offenses. People peeked from their windows as she walked through town, eyes filled with curiosity, judgment, and whispered prayers. By midday, Mondo gathered in a great circle around the baobab. The crowd swelled, market women with folded arms, young men leaning on spears, children sitting cross-legged in the dust. Everyone waited, hungry for truth. A single hush fell when the elders stepped forward, their robes brushing the earth. The oldest among them raised his staff and began to speak. "Children of Mondo," he said, "our ancestors taught us that honesty is the rope that holds a community together. When one person lies, the rope starts to tear." They reminded the people of old stories, of greedy spirits punished and humble souls rewarded. Cato finally stepped forward, a small bundle in his hands. Without anger, without arrogance, he laid out every complaint, written notes, borrowed amounts, witnesses who nodded in agreement. "These are the debts," he said. "These are the promises not kept." Each piece was like a stone added to Aisha's burden. She felt the crowd's eyes burning into her, the truth too heavy to ignore. But instead of remorse, Aisha's pride exploded. She spun toward Mama Tattoo, shouting, "You! This is all you're doing. You are making a small thing look big. You just want people to feel sorry for you." Gasps rippled through the crowd. An insult toward an elder, especially one who had helped her, was unforgivable. Mama Tattoo stood still, her face calm but deeply hurt. It was as if Aisha had spit on the entire community. From that moment, the crowd shifted. Disappointment hardened into anger. Women who once tolerated her now shook their heads in disgust. Young men muttered, "She has no fear of the ancestors." Even her old friends stepped back, distancing themselves from her boiling shame. The elders raised their hands, calling for silence. Their judgment was firm but fair. "Aisha," the elder said, "you must repay the loan within the time we set. You will restore what you took, not only in money but in honor." The tone grew heavier. "If you fail, you will be barred from the market of Mondo." A collective breath escaped the crowd. Being cut off from the market was more than punishment, it was social death. An elder leaned on his staff and spoke the final warning. "Remember, child, a person without community is like a tree without roots. It may stand for a moment, but it will soon fall." The words settled over Aisha like a dark shadow, marking the beginning of consequences she could no longer run from. Aisha walked through the market as if the weight of her shame did not exist. Her head was held high, her steps deliberate, her gaze sweeping past familiar faces. "They cannot see me like this," she whispered to herself. trying to convince her reflection in the polished metal of a vendor's scale. She smiled at the empty stalls as if they were still welcoming, but even the birds in the trees seemed to hush when she passed. The silence that greeted her was deafening. Neighbors who once waved and called her by name now turned their backs. The women she had once teased for their modesty now watched with quiet disapproval. Children pointed behind her, whispering to each other. Even the gossips, who used to shout her name from rooftops, stayed silent. Aisha felt the cold sting of their judgment, a silence louder than any insult. She stopped at the first shop, hand outstretched for a sweet bread, only to be met with a polite but firm refusal. "I am sorry, Aisha, but we cannot serve you today," the storekeeper said, his eyes not leaving hers. Another vendor repeated the same, closing shutters just as she reached the counter. Her usual charm, the lies, the flattery, all useless now. Even her boldest tricks had melted away like morning mist. Pride crumbled within her, leaving only a bitter taste of humiliation. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, sharp and unrelenting. She had money once, friends once, influence once, but all were gone. Each step through the market was a reminder of what she had lost. She sat on the edge of the fountain, staring at the dancing reflections in the water, feeling the emptiness of the world around her. Loneliness wrapped around her like a heavy blanket, cold and suffocating. Memories of Mama Tattoo surfaced unbidden. She remembered the warm smile, the gentle hands that had helped her, the trust that had been offered freely. She had laughed at her, mocked her, and taken her generosity for granted. Now, those memories cut sharper than a knife. "I was so blind," she whispered. "I did not see the heart behind the hands." Fear began to settle in her chest, guilt crawling through her veins, awakening the conscience she had long ignored. From the crowd, Cato approached, his movements measured and calm. There was no anger in his eyes, only a quiet authority that seemed to make the market itself pause. He stepped before her, the weight of tradition and justice in his presence. "Aisha," he said softly, yet his voice carried across the square, "this path you walk leads only to ruin. But the way to restore your honor still lies before you." He extended a simple choice, yet it shone with profound dignity. "Work for Mama Tattoo," he said. "Repay what you owe not with fear or shame, but with effort and humility. This is your chance to mend the bonds you have broken, to stand once more as a woman of respect in this town." Aisha looked into his eyes and saw the truth there. Redemption was possible, but only if she let go of her pride. The offer was not cruelty, it was justice shaped with mercy. "Bow your heart, not your head," Cato said, "and you may rise again, honored by the community you have wronged." For the first time in her life, Aisha felt the heavy burden of her choices, and for the first time, she wondered if she could find the courage to walk the path of humility. Aisha's lips trembled as she faced Cato, her chest rising with defiance. "I don't need this," she spat, her voice shaking but determined. "I can survive on my own. I don't need anyone to teach me humility." She turned abruptly, her heels clicking against the stone paths of Mondo, trying to leave the weight of judgment behind her. Pride burned hotter than the midday sun in her chest, blinding her to reason. But the sun hid behind clouds as reality began its quiet work. Hunger clawed at her belly, sharp and relentless. Her hands shook as she reached for bread, only to find the vendors' stalls firmly closed. The town that once whispered envy now refused to see her at all. Shame dripped over her like cold rain, and for the first time, she realized pride could not fill the empty spaces in her life. Tears blurred her vision as she stumbled, her feet carrying her toward the familiar shop where Mama Tattoo had once welcomed her. I was wrong," she whispered, voice cracking. Her legs trembled, her heart thundering with fear and hope. Each step toward the shop felt like a lifetime, but she moved forward, bowing her pride to the truth she had long denied. The wooden floorboards felt alien beneath her hands as she knelt to scrub the tiles. Each stroke of the brush carried years of arrogance away, revealing the humility buried beneath. Sweat beaded her forehead, stinging as she worked, but with each sweep, she felt lighter, as though the weight of her past transgressions was being washed down the drain. The market gathered quietly around the shop, curious and cautious. Some whispered, shaking their heads in pity, while others nodded in satisfaction, seeing justice in motion. Mothers drew their children close, pointing to the girl who had once mocked tradition and now embraced it. Every pair of eyes held a lesson, every glance a mirror of the community's heart. Mama Tattoo watched silently from the doorway. No words of anger escaped her lips. Her hands folded gently before her, her eyes warm yet steady. A simple nod met Aisha's gaze, and something in the young woman's chest broke open, a mixture of gratitude, sorrow, and awe. She had sought redemption, and here it was, offered without scorn, only with a wisdom that spoke louder than any words. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Aisha labored from dawn to dusk, tending to the shop, learning patience, discipline, and the rhythm of honest work. Each coin she counted, each bag of grain she carried, became a lesson in responsibility. She learned to measure value not in flash or vanity, but in effort and honesty. The day came when Aisha placed the final coin in Mama Tattoo's hand. The shop seemed to hold its breath. The crowd gathered outside murmured softly, witnessing the completion of a journey that had begun with arrogance and deceit. "It is done," she whispered, voice steady now, eyes bright with a newfound respect for life, for labor, for community. Sweat on her brow, calluses on her hands, and humility in her heart, Aisha finally understood. Honor was not a gift freely given. It was earned through struggle, patience, and the courage to face one's own failures. She looked up at Mama Tattoo, feeling the weight of her transformation settle like the evening sun over Mondo, and for the first time, she felt truly whole. Aisha walked through the market wearing plain clothes, her bright silks and sparkling jewelry long gone. The whispers followed her, but this time they were not of envy, they were of surprise. She carried baskets of yams for the elderly, helped children gather spilled grains, and offered water to tired traders. Her steps were quiet, purposeful, each act a small declaration. She had left behind the arrogance that once marked her every gesture. "Look at her," one mother murmured to her daughter. "She has learned what honor truly is." Aisha smiled softly, keeping her eyes low, feeling the warmth of community returning slowly around her. The market no longer seemed a place for vanity but a place for service, connection, and respect. Parents used her story as a cautionary tale, telling children, "See what comes of pride and shamelessness. Learn from Aisha's journey." Young ones listened wide-eyed, seeing both the folly of selfishness and the power of change. Mama Tattoo, seated by her stall, watched Aisha approach with a calmness that only a true elder can hold. "Money can be counted and returned," she said gently, "but dignity, my child, cannot be borrowed. It is earned by your deeds." Aisha bowed her head deeply, a gesture of sincere humility, the arrogance of the past completely washed away. Across Mondo, a new proverb took root: "A shameless heart is cured only when it meets a stronger mirror." Traders, children, and elders repeated it in hushed tones, reflecting on how justice and community had guided a young woman toward redemption. The town fell whole again, its unity and traditions reaffirmed, a living testament that honor and morality outlast vanity and selfish desires.